Well, hello, friends. Ryan here, professional life coach, Enneagram educator, and your host for this episode of Fourward Bound with the Enneagram. You know, the Enneagram is a powerful tool for building understanding, compassion, and achieving growth in our lives, grounded by 9 types or ways that our personalities and egos are structured. The conversations in this podcast are designed to illuminate the Enneagram in action by hearing directly from individuals who are working with the Enneagram and their type in their lives. The views reflected in these conversations are personal, and so what one person shares may not be true for all others who identify as their particular Enneagram type, and that's okay. My encouragement: listen with compassionate curiosity. Thanks for being with us. So today we are getting close to Enneagram Type 2, often referred to as the giver. And my guest today is my friend Dee, who identifies as a Type 2. Welcome, Dee.
Hey there, Ryan. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for having me.
Well, it is so helpful of you to be here, Dee.
That's what I do. That's what I do. That's what I do. Mm-hmm.
And we thank you for it, seriously. Dee, I am really looking forward to a conversation about how the 2 shows up in your life, how you're working with that. If it's okay with you, I'd like to start with just a little bit of a grounding and an overview of the type for our listeners, and then we'll quickly move into our conversation. Does that sound good for you?
Go for it.
Okay, awesome. Let's take a look together at Enneagram Type 2, often referred to as the giver. First, we look at the instinctual center of intelligence for the type. This could be head, heart, or body. Our Enneagram Type 2 friends are what we call a heart center type, an emotional intelligence that arises which gives them a warm and empathic presence in the world. The giver's primary way of experiencing and processing the world is through their emotions and relationships. People-oriented and nurturing, Type 2 leads with a tendency to prioritize relationships and connection over their own needs. The giver embodies a worldview that the world gives you love when you give of yourself. A belief system emerges for the type, give to get, where the focus is on the needs of others and the quest becomes being indispensable. And so 2 primary driving attentions emerge for Type 2. We'll refer to those as pride and other people's needs. First, let's look at pride. This is not limited to arrogance, but rather this deep sense of self-respect and self-worth that comes from the notion, I am indispensable. I can handle it all. Whatever the issue is, I can help. I can make it happen. I can do it. Type 2s are willing to go above and beyond to help those that they care about, and will go to great lengths to avoid disappointing others. Which brings us to this focus on other people's needs. The giver is especially interested in attending to what they identify as the needs of people they care about, and those who they would like to care for them. The 2 is generally friendly, expressive, quick to give advice or support. Tapped into the heart center, the 2 can sense the emotional needs of others and generally is keen at developing good feelings in others. Asked to focus on or share their own needs, the giver is likely to retreat, perhaps unaware of their own needs or unwilling to share so as not to be a burden. Though self-imposed through the pattern of the type, this feeling of being needed by so many people and projects can lead to stress. Type 2s often report a feeling that for all of the help and support they are providing to others, their own needs are not being paid attention to or met. Add to this a situation where their contributions are not warmly received or rebuked even, and this stress can escalate to anger, at times intense, sudden emotional outbursts. And now let's look at the virtue for the type, this highest expression of their potential. Think of it as keeping all the gifts for the type and then also uncovering or remembering a piece of truth that has been forgotten along the way. For type 2, we refer to the virtue as humility, this state of being that is unencumbered by pride, flattery, or a search for self-importance. It's a quality of open self-awareness and honest self-assessment, a recognition of one's own strengths and limitations. A resting, a confidence, a peace in the natural unfolding, the will of the universe, which does not require us to do anything other than show up and be. So, I think it's important to offer here that this is just a place from which to start. Everything I've mentioned may not resonate with every two. We are not caricatures of a type. We have a pattern, but we are also adaptive. At this point, I want to bring Dee into the conversation. Dee, I would love it if you would just kick us off briefly with what comes up for you in this moment. What is it like being a 2?
Well, I would like to say that being a 2 is the best thing ever.
I love it.
I think that, I love being a 2 in our world where, we are so politically divided and we feel like we disagree on so many things and there's so much tension and so many bad things happening. Like Mr. Rogers said, believe Mr. Rogers was a 2, always look for the helpers, right? When there's a disaster, there is, somebody there offering help. There's somebody digging through the rubble. There's somebody trying to feed someone or get some water or a shoulder to cry on. And to me, that's who we are. And to me, in my worldview, there is no greater expression of love than to be a 2 and to be there when the chips are down and when someone really needs you and to be able to offer that help. Because regardless of who you voted for or who you love or where you go to school or where you live, there's one way to help somebody change a flat tire. There's one way to be there if someone's lost someone who's really important to them. That is something that human pain and that human suffering is something that's felt by all of us. Yeah. And I think if all of us were able to think in a little bit more of a 2 way and we were able to give a little bit more, then the world really would be in a better place. And to me, there's really no greater joy than to see maybe when someone is struggling or, being somebody who's really emotionally intelligent and reading the emotions of other people to know when something's wrong, say, hey, are you okay? Do you want to talk about something? Do you not want to talk about something? Yeah. And to have that person to see the relief on their face when they feel seen and they feel heard. And when you're able to help somebody through a rough spot, there's really no greater gift. I mean, it's like being a parent and seeing, your child that you were able to help do something by themselves and really be able to earn a skill and find their way in this world. There's no greater gift than that. And not that there's anything wrong with the other numbers, but for me personally, obviously being a giver sort of colors my entire worldview. But I really think it's a wonderful, wonderful, exactly what you said. It's a gift.
Yeah. Well, I love that is where you are with it. I think that is beautiful and right and perfect. Dee, I want to follow this line for just a second. You said a couple things that really perked my ears up, and I'm curious how you feel about this. Folks who are listening who may be, trying to determine their type. I expect we've got some folks that are coming with that curiosity. Others may be looking to affirm something or understand others around them. But I think for the 2, and especially I just want to acknowledge, I'm a cisgendered male in this conversation, and you, Dee, are a mother. And there, I think, are cultural overlays around how folks look at this notion of the giver and the 2 as maternal. And I'm curious if you can play around with that just a little bit, and how does that resonate? And also then how does this instinctual nature extend beyond necessarily just the confines of your identity as a mother?
Sure. That's a great question. So I guess I'll share a story. I'll share a story that I've recently sort of realized with my daughter. So I am a mother. I'm lucky to be the mom of a 12-year-old boy, Anthony, and a 5-year-old named Ruthie. And Ruthie is a great kiddo. She is defiant. She's independent. She does have a little bit of obviously my last name is Grano. I'm not Italian, but I'm IBM, Italian by marriage. And so she sort of has this very passionate thread that runs through her. And I've observed, the older she gets and the more she's able to do things by herself, not only does she not need my help, it makes her very angry. It makes her very angry to be overhelped. And so for me, one of the tricks of being a mom is, you bring this baby into the world and they need all the help in the world. And this sort of continual process of having to let go is a learning process. And I think that it's a learning process, whether you are mothering your child, it's a learning process, it's a learning process for peers, your coworkers, in letting go. In recognizing when your help is no longer help and it's in turn a hindrance, or it's a means of I think if you're disintegrated to, or you're somebody who is really sort of in a bad place and you're overhelping, other people can never spread their wings and fly because you're up in their business helping in your way. And I think the key to being a helper is to really being able to sit back and say, okay, what does this person need? So I noticed that Ruthie and I were sort of butting heads quite a bit. And I said, you know what, kiddo? And I also decided, we had a really rough period in our family, just, maybe 6 months ago. And I said, you know what? I need help. And if I can get Ruthie to brush her teeth by herself or put her clothes in the dirty clothes hamper, or do whatever, I'm going to do it.
I stop you? I hate to interrupt you, but I want to dig into this moment, this what I think feels like a watershed moment for you, Dee, to announce to the family, I need help.
Yep.
Was that easy for you? Was that hard for you?
It was not at all. But I started to think really critically why, and this is the other thing that twos do quite a bit, right? I started to get really down on myself, and gosh, Ruthie yells at me all the time and says, you're a bad mommy, right? I mean, every 5-year-old has said this to their mother time and time again. Started to really internalize it and I started to feel so sad. And by the way, in order to do that, I had to really separate myself, get some alone time, and give myself the space to process and think. Because as a two, trying to figure out why I'm sad takes a minute. I mean, other types are probably like, I'm sad, here's why, it's your fault, here's what I'm going to do. Like that process, I think, is shorter for other Enneagram types, but it's not for me. So when I started to go through this process of, I'm incredibly sad, I'm down on myself as a parent, what can I do? Is there something here I can change, or is there something here I can't? Right? Because sometimes you can't help. Sometimes your power is just not needed there. And I start to think to myself, well, maybe she's really ready to start being her own person. And maybe she's angry at me because I'm getting in her business where, and even if she doesn't brush her teeth right, or she puts her underwear on backwards, she's got to learn how to do all of those things herself. So I said, okay, Ruth, here's what we're going to do. You're a big girl. You're going to get yourself ready for bath time. And if you do it, I will give you $1. Well, every parent's got to do what every parent's got to do. But then we ran out of dollars, and she was like, well, just make one. And I said, well, if I'd have thought about that, I could have saved myself quite a bit of money. And she enjoys being able to do things for herself. And I have
Yeah.
noticed not only are things smoother between us, because I've actually given some physical distance, right? I've given physical distance. She's doing it. I'm not over helping. Things are not only better between us, she's starting to say, Mommy, can I help? I want to help with dinner, right? And I think in that way, I'm empowering her to give me help, not in sort of a codependent way, but that gives her autonomy to
Right.
sort of decide, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to help? And I would say for people who are struggling defining what their type is, I would challenge you to think, if you feel like you might be a giver, might be a type 2, really think about, do I help whether or not it's needed?
Right.
Do I help whether or not it's asked for?
Yeah. And I'm curious, this example at home, I think is really powerful and will resonate certainly with a lot of folks. I'm curious then for you to tease out for us that the giving doesn't stop at home, right? I mean, it doesn't stop in your role as mother to Ruthie, right?
Correct.
This shows up across, is it fair to say it shows up across your lived experience really in all places and dimensions?
Yes, I would say so. And one of the things where I think the more you get to know about it too, the more you get to know about a giver is that when there is a crisis, there's nobody better to have on your side than a 2.
Yeah.
And my professional life, I'm a communicator, a public relations professional, and one of my sweet spots is crisis communications.
Hmm.
Part of that is having worked in a newsroom during 9/11. That's how I started my career. Part of that is just in our family, in our family life growing up. I come from a broken household. My parents were divorced. There was crisis. There were things that just had to be taken care of. And
Hmm.
even as a little kid, if something had to be taken care of, I took care of it.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that has actually become a superpower for me professionally, because if something happens and I'm brought into a room, there's no deer in the headlights here. There is, okay, who's the audience? What happened? What is the information that reporters have? What do we need to own? How do we make it stop? How do we move on? Right. It's
Yeah.
all of these questions while everybody else is sort of sitting there shell shocked. You're sort of moving through and you're addressing the needs of the people that are around you. And then that's when this comes into this is I think a positive example that I can give to you of a stress point.
Hmm.
So like in Enneagram world, I think you call it different things, but like when the what hits the fan, what do you do when you're stressed? And for me, when I am stressed, I take charge and things get done. And they usually get done to a pretty high standard, to a pretty good and high standard.
Hmm.
I and that's really one of the interesting things about a giver, right? You think, oh, maternal, kind, what do you need? What do you need? If you cross a 2 or a 2 is stressed, get out of the way,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
that's and that can be good or that can be bad. But when you're in a crisis situation and decisions have to get made really quickly,
Hmm.
a giver, a type 2 is kind of your girl. Now that can also be super negative. But in a crisis situation where like somebody is lost, somebody's got to get found, the house is on fire, like, and you need somebody who reacts and gets things done.
Hmm.
That is something that I bring to my clients professionally. That's valued and very needed.
Yeah. What do you think about, sometimes we're referring to the type as the giver, and in other traditions and schools, you'll hear it referred to as the helper. And I think, both of these words make a lot of sense and are really resonant. But for me, the notion of the giver, it feels more personal. Like this was mine and I am giving it to you, as opposed to helper, which I don't know, for me feels a little more transactional. And I'm curious, what do you think about this notion of there being this personal attachment to what it is that you are offering in these examples? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, everything for a giver is personal.
Mm,
Work
yeah,
is often very personal. You will see a lot of givers, helpers, type twos, are doctors, nurses, teachers,
yeah,
people who, police officers, firefighters, people who are in
yeah.
that, who are in those giving
Yeah, in
professions.
those professions, but my guess is, Dee, for you, I mean, you're not a doctor, nurse, or a firefighter, but your work as a communications professional. This is personal for you, yeah?
It is very personal, right? And I
Yeah.
and I often it's kind of funny. I often sort of end up with these clients that are, and I do mean this in the best possible way, clients that are traditionally misunderstood,
Mm,
traditionally given up on. I actually do a lot of work in the education space. I do a lot of work in the healthcare space. I do a lot of
mm-hmm.
work in the profit space. So it's kind of funny, even though like it's the most giver, most helper thing you can do, right? Is
Yeah,
help the
yeah,
helpers
yeah,
do what they need to do better, right?
yeah.
And everything is deeply connected and deeply personal.
And given that, you touched a little bit on when the shit hits the fan. What happens, maybe take us through an example as, you can keep it as high level as you want, but when your help is, rebuked or
Um,
unappreciated.
ooh. Generally, my help is pretty well appreciated because helpers are very willing, givers are very willing to do
Hmm.
all your dirty work so you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I have had a couple of situations where I took someone's project as my own. And like this is going to come as a complete shock to everyone, but I used to be a theater major. And yeah, I did have a friend who needed some help, and I was a right hand girl, and the production went up. It was marvelous. Everybody was clapping, 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 clapping. And then after the show, I wasn't happy for her. I was like, but I'm the one who did all the work. And
Mm.
this was like in college, right? And so I remember that feeling, and I remember just thinking, well, maybe next time, if it's that important to me, it needs to be my show.
Mm.
And I need to not latch on to the creative idea of somebody else. I need to put my own show together, and I need to rock it out, and I need to make that happen for myself. And
Yeah.
so actually that was a really good learning experience, because that's eventually what I did. But I think that's probably a really good example, that not in my and it's not that my help was rejected. My help was used. It was used up and spat out.
Mm.
And that didn't really feel very good. But I will say again, that was an experience where I was very hurt, and it took me a while to figure out why I was so upset and why I was so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, this is good to touch on this because we talk about the type being a heart center and having this emotional intelligence. And, I think that can get misunderstood. Like, it's like because the focus here, I think what we're hearing you share is really outward facing emotional intelligence. It's not that you're void of inward facing emotional intelligence, but that's not the comfortable, familiar place to go. Going outward is the comfortable and familiar place to go. I see you nodding, but for folks who aren't seeing the visual, you affirm that.
Definitely. And it's really just become a skill. I
Yeah.
would say, in the world of the Enneagram, there's this funky little circle with these little lines and angles and
Yeah.
things, right? And when you're stressed, you go to a specific point. You got your wings on either side that sort
Yeah.
of help bolster your skill set.
Yeah.
And then the place where you want to be is really the spot of the four. It is, and it is the place where you are allowed to feel. It is okay to feel how you feel.
Yeah.
And for helpers and givers, you feel it's amazing. I have before looked at close friends and said, I can see you're upset. I can tell exactly this is exactly what happened. Tell me I'm wrong. And they're like, oh my God, how did you do that? Like, I can't
Yeah.
believe you knew exactly who did what happened. It's like, because I can read you like a book. I
Yeah.
can read your face and know. But for me to tell that about myself,
Hmm.
I have learned the skill. I've had to learn skills of how to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Share with us.
I have to pull away from people. I actually have to completely remove myself from other people because I compulsively can't stop doing the thing. And part of that is that my 12-year-old son is autistic and nonverbal. I'm a caregiver of a disabled person. He requires a lot of help day in, day out. So for me, it's actually taking myself out of my home, going for
Yeah.
a walk, going on a retreat, so physically pulling myself away and making myself be still without putting things on top of it, right?
So
So,
I want to practice this for just a second right here in this moment.
right. Oh, you want me to stop talking? Is that what you're telling me to do? Oh
Well, I'm
dear.
just curious. If we go to a place just for a moment of stillness and following the breath inwardly, and I'm curious, like even just in a brief check-in of quiet, what does that feel like for you, Dee?
So for me, that place can feel empty and dark.
Empty and dark.
It can feel very empty and dark.
Yeah.
And part of it is just that I'm used to filling that space with to-dos and the helperism of other people who really do need help, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
that emptiness is okay. And I think for givers, the emptiness is a scary, scary place,
Yeah.
right? Because if you imagine your life as a pitcher and you're always pouring out,
Yeah.
you will become empty.
Yeah.
And that emptiness, and that's sort of our defense mechanism. If
Yeah.
you never look inside your pitcher, you never have to admit that it's empty.
Yeah.
But and then the other thing for me, and I actually read about the type 4 a lot,
Hmm.
because for me that's the struggle. Like I need me some skills. So when I read the type 4 and I read about, a tendency to be melancholy or to get stuck in feelings and to not be able to find your way out, to me what I've learned to understand is that void of everything, there can be emptiness and there can be darkness, but the darkness is okay. If I sit in the darkness long enough, I'll see light.
Yeah,
But I
totally.
but I can't run away from it,
Yeah.
and I have to practice being comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I think this is a really great insight, Dee. I mean, it is a really great insight. And, you're calling out this practice of getting still, getting quiet, which for you, what I've heard you say is really requires you to remove yourself from environments where there is this tendency to reach outward, to focus outward, and allow yourself the time and the space to look inward. And yes, it's true that for the two, what we sometimes call the growth is toward the point four. And yes, the four is really comfortable looking inward. And yes, it's true that that can lead to sadness and melancholy, but it doesn't have to your point. And growing this okayness with just sitting with whatever is there, like a willingness to stop and look at it and just be with it. So I want to thank you for that sharing. We're almost out of time, which is unbelievable, but I have one more question for you that I'd really like to hear, which is for folks who have a two in their life, a significant other, a very close friend, a partner, and they're kind of coming at heads with the two for whatever reason. But what are some tips or tricks or advice or counsel you might offer for folks to to find a place of greater ease in their relationship with a two?
That's a great question. I think that I would say, well, I guess first and foremost, understand that your giver or your helper needs some help.
Hmm.
And one of the ways that you can express your love to a two
Hmm.
is to say, hey, can I help you? Because I think one of the things that happens when you're a two is everybody gets used to
Right.
you taking care of business and you not needing anything,
Right.
right? And so I think if you're in a relationship with a two, like this is something that my husband has learned to do and become good at. Like when I say I have it handled, like it is still nice to be asked if I need some help. Even if I don't need the help, I'll remember that you offered it, right?
Yeah.
So understand that this compulsive desire to help is really asking for help is hard, but if it's offered, it really does give me an opportunity to say, okay, okay, yeah, maybe I really should. And by
Yeah.
the way, if you're a type two, start with this at the grocery store. Somebody says, hey, do you need help with bringing your groceries to the car? You say, yes. Say, yes. When it doesn't even, can I get the door for you? Yes. Take it. Even
Yeah.
if it's two, take it. It's the
Yeah.
window to getting some other things. If there's a type two in your life and they are upset, but they don't know, and you're like, hey, what's wrong? And like, I allow them to have the space to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And like legit understand they don't know. We
Yeah.
don't know. We
Right.
have to figure it out. It's not a passive or aggressive. It's not intended to be a passive or aggressive. It's fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it it genuinely, it sounds weird to be completely emotionally intelligent and to completely just not even know why you're upset or why you're sad.
Yeah,
Um,
but and based on what you've shared earlier, Dee, I mean, curious if this resonates, like maybe even offering whatever support would allow the two the time and space to be alone with themselves to do some sorting of that might be a really great way to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hey, I've got the kids. Why don't you just go for a little walk? You
yeah,
look stressed. Why don't you just go for a walk? Go by yourself somewhere. Just go for a drive or something.
yeah.
Even that is super helpful.
Well, thank you. I think we got some really good insights for how to be of support and assistance to the twos in our lives. And I think we also got some really great insights into how, as a two, folks might think about the work and the opportunity. This is one of my favorite things about the Enneagram, which is, we identify our type, and that is a pattern and a structure, but that's really just where the work begins. Really, it's then about unlocking what are the opportunities? What is the growth potential? What am I missing out on life that I can experience if I start looking around some of these corners and blind spots? And I think you've demonstrated that beautifully for us today, Dee. So thank you. What else? What other final thoughts? What goodies maybe were on your mind to share today that we've not gotten to?
Well, I have a goodie that involves a story about you and me that I
Oh,
think your
fun.
listeners would appreciate,
Oh,
right? So
good.
when we started some of this work together, it was, yeah, this idea of self-care and creating space and and all of these things were really new concepts to me. And as I discussed earlier, the point that I need to aspire to, right, that I struggle with is something that the 4 does really well. And as most of your listeners probably know by now, you're a 4. This is a valuable story for 2s and probably for 4s. So I was going through a really difficult work situation. And it was one of these things where the executive directorship of this organization was kind of opening up. And I thought, maybe I should apply. Maybe I should apply for this. I was very conflicted about it. And you and I were talking about it. And you offered such a beautiful revelation, and you spoke truth to me in a way that is that a lot of people don't have the courage to do. And now I'm going to get choked up. So you told me in a really supportive way, you said, I don't think you really want this job. I think you feel like you need to take this job because you don't want to let other people down. And you were right. And so you really challenged me to think about, like, what do you want to do? What is this really what you want? Or is this something that you just feel like you have to do for other people? And that was one of the most mind-blowingly helpful things that anyone has ever told me professionally. And to this day, when I'm dealing with a difficult situation and I find myself sort of mulling over what to do, I literally think, what would Ryan do? What would Ryan do? WWRD. And that's one of those really powerful things that when you're able to have this language with somebody else, right? The Enneagram is sort of our personal development language.
Yeah.
You can learn from other people and have a conversation with others that really helps you think about, how would a 4 handle this?
Yeah.
Or how would an 8 handle this? Or how would a networker handle this? Or how do perfectionists do it? Or how do visionaries do it? You learn the skill sets that you need when you need them. And so I just wanted to take an opportunity to tell you thank you for that, and that those personal relationships are really what make the world go round.
Yeah. Because
when you have a personal relationship with somebody, you can talk to them in that way, and they can hear you in a way that maybe they can't by reading in a book or whatever.
Yeah, the Enneagram is powerful in community, and you made me a little misty with that story, Dee, so I appreciate you sharing. What I would say in response to that is, if that was sage advice, great, and if it was, it required 2 things. It required an open heart on my side, but it also required an open heart on your side. And so it became good advice because it was right for you at that moment and because you had an openness to it. And so I say to you, thank you for your work. It's clear in how you've shared with us today, which has been so beautiful. And so thank you. And, I think also this advice you offer of, like, figure out your type and then figure out what your growth point is and find yourself a friend who is that growth point. And I do this. I'm a 4 and I grow toward the 1, and I've got 1s in my life who I reach out to on the regular. But you got to be open to hearing it as well. So, it takes 2 to tango.
100%. It takes 2 to do lots of things.
Yeah, that's true. Dee, this has been a joy. And, moving forward in the podcast, we're going to bring folks in and, dyads and triads and look at how types intersect and interact and the things that we have in common. And so maybe you'd be up for coming back and hanging out with us again one day soon.
I would absolutely love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And keep up the good work.
We hope you are taking away a new learning or insight today, maybe about yourself, someone in your life, or both. If so, time well spent. And if you are ready to explore this work on a more personal level, I invite you to be in touch. Visit us on the web at forwardbound.com. That's FOURWARDBOUND.com. There you can learn more about our coaching and Enneagram education work and schedule yourself for a free of charge discovery call. Finally, we look forward to welcoming you back for another episode of Fourward Bound with the Enneagram very soon. Again, thanks for spending this time with us. Be well.